Okay, in this lecture, we're going to talk about aggregate function and briefly about um, function that apply only to single row. And as the name aggregate function implied, aggregate function applied to more than one row. So it's kind of like a multiple row function. So let's look at what are the aggregate function available in SQL. They're pretty simple. Count how many row exists in your table or in your select statement as a result of your select statement. Maxima, minimum value, sum, and average, and max, minima, and sum and average apply only to column that is numerical columns that have numerical value or numerical data type. A single row function applied to a particular column, one row at a time. And for string column, you can use upper, lower, substring, and the length. For numerical column, numerical function include rounding, like round the 2 decimal point, absolute value, ceiling, and mode. And for date and time, we can use now, which is the current date and time, and current day, which is current day, year, and date difference is actually to calculate the difference between two dates. So it can be quite useful. So it depends on the data type of column. The single row function we use certainly will be different. Let's look at the aggregate functions first. First is count. Count is just count how many rows do you have in a select statement. Select count, asterisk just means we don't care which column. We just want to know how many rows do we have in the student table. That's what you get. And if we look at the MySQL Workbench, this is what we use in terms of, for instance, let's look at the student. If we have this table data, if we click on here on any of the table, that's what we, this gives us the whole table's data display. We don't care which, we want all the column. However, when we use count and asterisk, we're getting back only the number of rows in this student table. And to some extent, you can count just one of the column if you wish, like student number. So if I use student number, I will get the same count. However, if you use address, remember we have one student whose address is null, and if it's null, then it's not count as, it will not be included in this counting. So let's see, we have 6. We have only 5 because one student does not have an address yet, or the address is null. So you need to pay attention to the impact of null value in your in some of the row and its impact to aggregate function. Usually they're not included in count, in sum, in average, etc. So just be aware of that. Okay, so it is recommended that we use count in parentheses, put asterisk in it if you want to count number of row in the select statement. And use primary key is a safe bet because primary is not null, so we don't deal with the non-null a null situation. Okay. And we can earlier, let's see, let's look at here. You may notice that when we use count, the column name actually is the formula. Count address, count asterisk will show up as a column name, which in a lot of cases it's not an ideal case. So we could use alias. So for instance, we are actually counting how many students live in the state of Virginia. And in that case, we create an alias and we just call it VA student count. And the result would actually show using VA student count as the column heading, which make the result more readable and understandable. As I mentioned, the one of the students does not have an address or the address is null, so it's not counted for. We only have 5 students who has address. Okay. For maxima, in this case, select maximum salary. We try to find out who the highest salary from the instructor table, and the result is 72K. Okay. It would ignore null value, so null value would not be counted for. Okay. And when you apply max to numerical column, you've got the highest number. If it's a day, it will be the latest date. Okay. If you apply to string, earlier I said only apply to numerical column, which is most common situation. However, if you apply to string, you will get the greatest text value. Let's see whether that's really true. So for instance, we use max city. Let's see whether it will work. Yeah, so it's actually kind of sorted the city name in ascending order and find the city name which has the largest string by comparison. And Rockville is the, I think we can certainly try this. City, run it. Okay, so we have A, F, and Rockville certainly has the, in terms of sorting, it's the largest in terms of string comparison. Okay, so we could definitely use this feature. For day, this I can see quite common. We may try to find the latest date. Okay. So max minima is similar. Okay, minima salary, who has the minima, the least salary in the instructor table, and no value are ignored, because no really means I don't know. So if you don't know, there's really no way to make any comparison, so it's excluded. Sum is added up. So if you say select sum salary from instructor, this will return the total salary you pay to instructor, annual salary, that's the annual total salary, which your salary expense, then you can use this to calculate. You can calculate average. So this will be the average salary for instructor. And instructor who we don't know the salary will be excluded in this calculation. You can write it in one select statement, multiple aggregate function for the whole instructor table, like count, average, minimum, maximum. So they would show up as this format. Well, let's introduce DISTINT, which is not an aggregate function, but DISTINT means that you don't want the result set has duplicated value. For instance, you say select title from instructor table, and we have two instructor their title are the same, which is teacher. And so in this case, the result set would display as dean, teacher, and clerk. However, if we add the distinct reserve word before title, then we're going to remove the duplicated title and only show dean, teachers, and the clerk. Okay, and so this can be done. If you're using Access, by the way, you need to switch to the SQL view and actually deal with the SQL statement and to add the distinct reserve word. There's no easy way to use the SQL painter to do it. We can combine count and distinct together. So we can say select count the distinct city, how many distinct city we have in the student table, and so the result will be 3. Okay. In Access, this is you cannot do this because Access somehow does not like to apply count and distinct together. But the standard SQL, this is correct syntax. But how do we do it in Access? And although we're not going to teach Access, we can use a two-step process, which you in one of the assignment, a SQL database assignment, you actually need to use this approach to count certain value, to count how many distinct value in a particular column. Use a two-step process instead of a count distinct. And certainly this in MySQL you can do this, but you will be asked to use the two-step process. How do we do that? We will create a view first. We briefly mentioned view. Create a view. We call it distinct title us, and this is the select statement, which would return only all the title with no duplication. So they are distinct title, list of title with no duplication. And so we create a view. And once we have the view should have only 3. Let me see when I have it. That select statement should return only 3 title, and so the view, if you use the view in your select statement, it should only return 3 title, and then you can count, which will return 3 for you. Okay, this is a little bit complicated, so let's try to demonstrate this in our SQL Workbench. Okay, so let's come to SQL Workbench. Let's say select title without distinct. Then we see for title with duplication in it. If we add distinct, if we run it, then there's no duplication. Okay. We can create a view to save this select distinct title from instructor. Create view. I'll just call it distinct title as. So this is what we have. We're creating a view called distinct title based on a select statement which has a distinct keyword. So if we run it, let's run it. Okay, nothing being returned, but if you look at the last message, it says 0 affected. Okay, but the view will be created. If you look at the view, okay, the view has been created. If you look at the definition of the view, okay, it's actually much longer than the one we put in, but if you really look at it, it's equivalent of, this is related to some physical attribute of the database. So technically we don't really need this. It's create view. In the we give the view. Oh, hold on a second. I think I made a mistake. This was something that exists earlier. Let me drop this view. So we start from scratch. Okay, let's run it. Okay, I think I made a mistake earlier. I run it, it was successful, but I forgot to refresh. So if I refresh, yeah, there's a distinct title here. Okay, so it's equivalent. Let me delete this. It's not going to affect the definition of the view. So create view, distinct title as, that's the select statement. So we can retrieve the definition of the view based on the select statement. Okay. Now we can actually query this view. I usually call it query the query, which we can define a select statement. Let's say we select everything from, let me just double click on the name of the view. From the view, hold on a second, semicolon. That return the 3 unique title, and therefore if we just say count, we will get 3, which means 3. Oh, hold on a second. How come it is 4? Let me double check. Let's run it. Oh, I think, do they include? let's say 4 row. I think the uh, let's go back to the instructor and then come here. Yeah, I do have a testing data that has a null value for the title, which I didn't pay attention. And the null in this case seems to be counted as a unique value. That's interesting. That's new to me. So let's delete this, okay, to avoid any confusion. Certainly we can keep it here, but now we have to know the distinct title. If there's a null in the title of certain row, then it will count as one of the unique value. Okay, so let's see. We can delete row, highlight it, and delete the row we highlighted. Remember to apply, finish. So now if we come back to what we have, let's just start from, okay, let's come back here. First, just look at the view. Then we got a claim 3 unique title. Okay, so we're in business. Then we can do count. Run it. It will return 3 instead of 4. So be aware when you follow the tutorial and use the SQL statement in the slide, sometimes you don't get the same result that's shown in the slide because you may did some insert update and changing the underlying data in certain table, so the result may be different. Just need to be aware of it. Okay, so let's continue. So make sure you understand how this two-step process can be done, and I'm certain you can use count a distinct title in one shot and get it done. And here we did mention when you execute create view statement, you do need to remember to refresh to see the view, okay, in the schema of the database. Let's stop here. When we come back, we will actually cover something called group by and having, which is quite complicated, and it's very powerful and useful at the same time. So until then, thank you for watching. See you next time.